Hi, Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project. Coming back with part 3 of my series of training load metrics videos. This time I'm going to use the Performance Manager chart and talk a little bit about tapering. And last time we talked a little bit about build, and this time we're going to talk a little bit about tapering. So once again, the blue line is a chronic training load. The pink or magenta line is acute training load. The yellow bars are training stress balance, and down below we have a chronic training load ramp rate, CTL ramp rate. So basically, I've talked about this in a prior video, that when acute training load is higher than the chronic training load, in other words, the more recent training, in this case is about 2 weeks worth of training. It's a exponentially exponentially weighted rolling average with a 7-day time constant. So it's about 2 weeks of data for this acute training load. When that is higher versus the chronic training load, which is what is a exponentially weighted 6-week time constant training load, meaning about the last 3 months of data, or TSS. So when this is higher than this, it's pulling it up. Think of it as this magenta line is pulling the blue line up. It's pulling the chronic training load up because it's higher. And we can also see that in the ramp rate. Just follow up above and below. Notice that the pink magenta acute training load is lying above the blue line, and below we have CTL ramp rate, all positive. All positive. Now, when the acute training load drops below, as you see here, drops below chronic training load, it is like letting the air out of the balloon, so to speak. You're deflating the chronic training load. You're not supporting it anymore. So when this falls below, chronic training load goes down. But again, because of the math, look what happens. Because it's ATL minus CTL equals your training stress balance. Once you have ATL less than CTL, CTL is a higher number, you're going to get a positive. All right? So I just said that wrong. Chronic training load minus acute training load. All right? Chronic training load minus acute load. So this is higher, this is lower. When a chronic training load is higher than the acute training load, the acute training load is sunk down below, then that means your TSB starts to swing positive. And that means you're starting to freshen up a little bit. So you can see that happens here. You can see that happens here, right over here, where once ATL dips below chronic training level, TSB starts popping up. The other thing that happens, and realize this, when you come up for air and you're letting yourself have a positive TSB, you're giving up chronic training load. So this is like money in the bank, money in the bank, money in the bank. And now we are making withdrawals, That's the analogy I use. So we've put money in the bank here. We made a little withdrawal right here. Put money back in the bank, a little withdrawal right here. put money back in the bank, build that account up, and then we're going to make our big withdrawal down here. So there it is in terms of an analogy. Now, in this chart up above, the top chart, the blue diamonds represent a race day. So you can see that there is a reason why we let the training taper, the acute training load, taper off so we could bring form up a little bit. And in this case, we managed to ease off the pedal a little bit on the laying down the acute training load, ease off the pedal, and yeah, we gave up some chronic training load. We went from 147 here down to 138 here. So we gave up a little bit of chronic training load. We ease up the pedal on our acute training load. That's called the taper, to let the TSB come positive here. Notice, though, we did this. We had been building, that when we let our foot off the pedal, we didn't let it off enough where the ramp rate went all the way negative. We let it off enough to let that ramp rate get closer down to 0, but not negative. That way, after the race, we sort of get back into it. And, after a race, there's some recovery days. This TSB is the effect of the race. But you can see there's a few recovery days where we're not really, doing a whole lot to build again. We're just sort of maintaining at best. But if you don't get into the negatives, then you're able to bounce your training back up and get into that ramp rate again. So this is a B-raise taper. A B-raise taper, as far as I'm concerned, gets your TSB into the anywhere from about -5, even up to +10. Now this one here is +12, but we're dealing with a person with a high chronic training load, and so it's not quite the same as someone with a low training load. So if you have something between -5 plus 10, or better yet, -5 to +5 on the TSB, and your ramp rate doesn't get all the way down to 0, that's a B-raise taper. That's pretty good. You might consider this a C-raise taper. This one over here, you can see this is a race day, racing at -13 TSB and a CTL ramp rate that's still above 4. That's like we're just going to go out and run that day, and we're running in a race, but we're not really in race form at that point in time. So you look at here. This is a B-raise taper over here. Notice TSB +11 and ramp rate is +0.2, so that's a B-raise taper. This is a B-raise taper because we're still positive. We're still positive on the ramp rate, and this is a B-raise taper, +9, still a positive ramp rate. But you can see that we've got something planned here. It's called the Olympic Trials, and we can see that we want an A-raise taper, of course. I actually plan my my TSS out ahead, which I can do in WKO. I can put planned workouts in there so that I could come over to this, and this particular chart allows me to look at projections of where the TSB is going to end up. So this is today. This is race day, a couple of days from now. And we can see that in this case, we're going to get to a TSB of 29, and we're going to get to a ramp rate that is -1.5. But more importantly, particularly with ramp rate, what I like to see is for an A race, I like to see the ramp rate look negative for at least 1 day to up to maybe 5 days tops. Ideally, maybe 3 days. So here we have for this athlete 1, 2, 3 days. I'm looking over here, this number right here. So today the athlete is at, or yesterday the athlete was at 0 plus 0.2. Then they go a little bit negative for 1, 2, 3 days. So that is your A-raise taper. Somewhere, I would say for a good A-raise taper, somewhere 15 to 25-ish. Sometimes it could be even up to 30-ish, as you see here. This athlete carrying a heavy training load, I want to let the TSB come up a little bit more. But it's not just about the TSB. Like I showed you before here, I'm going to switch back to this chart here. We had a positive TSB and a positive ramp rate. They're not going to perform great. They'll perform reasonably well. In fact, in that race, this athlete PR'd in the half marathon. So they're going to run well, but it's not like super optimal. This over here is A-race optimal. Positive TSB in that plus 15 to plus 25 range is what I'd recommend for most people. And a negative ramp rate of at least 1 day up to about 5 days. If it's more than 5 days, then you're losing too much CTL. Now, I don't know how long this will take to load. Oh, there it goes. So this athlete raced the marathon right here. You can see the athlete goes into post-marathon recovery, right? Post-marathon recovery. And here we have a positive TSB right there. It's positive 3. And then we have a positive, this one's pretty high, positive 19. But even though the TSB is positive, and that's looking really good, the person's been a negative ramp rate for too long. They've given up too much CTL for that positive 19 to mean anything. So that is not an optimal condition. You want to see the TSB in that plus 15 to plus 25 and the ramp rate negative for 1 to 5 days max. More than that, you risk losing way too much CTL and really not, and that starts to hamper your performance as well. So there you have it. There's a little bit on the taper side of things, looking at training load metrics, and that's part 3. And I will come back with part 4 and talk about how not all TSS is created equal. See you then. Bye-bye.